Let's get started. Well, hi everyone. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon or this morning, depending on, or this evening, depending on where you're joining us from all around the world. And thank you for joining our latest webinar, which is titled 5 Truths About Content Creation Involving AI. My name is James Brown, and I'll be your host for today. We've got a super informative discussion coming up with a very special guest who is joining me. But before we dive into our topic today, I'm just going to do some introductions and just a quick couple of housekeeping pointers. So in terms of housekeeping, we've got time for Q&A at the end, so please feel free to pop your questions in the chat or using the Q&A function throughout the webinar, and my guests and I will get to those as soon as possible at the end of our discussion. And we'll also be sharing a recording in the coming weeks as well. So if you need to drop off at all, rest assured you get a copy in your inbox as soon as possible. So that's housekeeping, nice and easy. Let's do some introductions. So I'll kick off myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is James and I'm Head of Commercial at Comtec Translations. We are a language, localization and culture agency based here in the UK. And we specialise in supporting international brands communicate in over 250 languages, which feels like an awful lot of languages to do. I'm also delighted to be joined by my special guest, Sarah Lewis, who is Creative and Strategic Planner at Thread. Welcome, Sarah. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and Thread?
Yeah, thanks so much, James. I also love that this is very much a normal Tuesday for the two of us, is like this conversation. So I love that we get to open that up to the rest of the world today. But I'm Sarah Lewis, as James mentioned. I work for Thread Creative. We're a copywriting studio based out of Portland, Oregon, though we kind of are sprinkled a bit throughout North America. If there's words involved, then we are involved. We do everything from naming to high volume product content to campaigns. We work with some of the world's largest brands, and we also take a lot of pride in being able to work pro bono for nonprofit organizations. And yeah, we're just really excited to have this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, it's great to have you on board today. So what brings Comtec and Thread together for this discussion today? So in our purest forms, both Comtec and Thread, we're content creation agencies. Thread, in terms of them, it's creating compelling content and copy. And in terms of Comtec, it's localization of this copy for international audiences. We first met through the B Corp community. We're both B Corp agencies. And we quite quickly discovered that our agencies are very aligned in terms of how we work, our people, our values. But interestingly, our experiences with AI, also a lot of similar experiences with coming to the AI in how we work. Obviously, in the last couple of years, AI has exploded onto the scene, and it's no doubt transformed how we create content, in addition to many other things. And at the same time, though, as this explosion, there's lots of noise, hype, scaremongering, polarization around AI, and it can often feel overwhelming, daunting, and difficult to actually work out how do we use AI properly in our work, and how can we actually make use this for good. So we felt it was the right time to join forces and actually talk about experiences around AI and take a critical view of 5 key myths that have arisen around AI usage in the last couple of years. These 5 myths, which I'm sure many of you will have heard of or thought yourselves, include AI is brand new, AI doesn't need humans in the loop, AI is always cheaper, AI is always faster, and AI is creative. So we're going to see if those myths are quite true in the next 30 minutes or so. And as we talk through each of those, we're also going to be sharing the pros and cons, limitations of AI usage, along with some practical advice and examples of how to use AI and when not to use AI in your workflows as well. So if you're looking to get started with AI, if you're midway on your AI journey, or you're any combination of overwhelmed, confused, excited, exasperated regarding AI, which is probably most of us on this call, this is hopefully the webinar for you. Hopefully Sarah and I can share some useful stuff. So Sarah, shall we get cracking and look at our 5 myths?
I mean, as I said when we started, let's party, James.
Let's party indeed. Right, so myth number 1 is AI is brand new. Now, I know this is one we've talked at length about, Sarah, ourselves previously, and I'm happy to kick things off and just share a few insights from the translation perspective. So in translation, there's 2 types of AI we look at. There's machine translation, and there's large language models, which have risen in the last couple of years. Now, these might seem brand new concepts, But actually, the concept of machine translation dates back to the 17th century. And significant research around machine translation actually started in the 1950s. Um, it came into wide usage in the 1970s, thanks to a company called Sistran, and lots of other solutions followed in the late 90s and early noughties. We've also seen MT, as we call it in the industry, evolve from statistical-based machine translation, which takes a statistical method of translating text, to what we call now neural machine translation, which looks at neural networking and deep learning in terms of translating text. And as you've probably all seen as well, we've also seen the rise of large language models, or LLMs, like ChatGPT. So while AI translation seems like a really new thing, it's actually been researched and refined for 70 years, and or technically 300 if you want to look at it from that perspective. So it's been around for a while. Sarah, what are your thoughts on this from a content perspective?
For me, I think that really what is new in AI is that we have such access to it. Like AI is not new, but when it comes to generative AI, everyone is now playing with it, right? Everyone can go to ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever is your tool of choice, and spin something up. It's kind of like when you think about, and I'm sure many people have heard this before, but I think it's really true, when everyone became photographers with the introduction of social media and camera phones, all of a sudden there was so much content out there. And it also, I mean, it did create space for some people who didn't have access before to start to create some really cool stuff. But then there was also a world of overwhelmingly bad things. So, like, that I think is the thing that we're really seeing and that we're really feeling today is just access. And so, with that, with all of that content, we are trying to understand how to sift through kind of the mess and the
Yeah.
myths, which is why we're here.
Absolutely. I think it does feel overwhelming, doesn't it? It does feel like it's exploded, first of all. But I think, like you said, I think the phone analogy is a really great one. Yes, we all have a smartphone, and yes, we all take pictures on it. But would you necessarily take selfies at your wedding for your professional pictures? Not sure. You'd use a professional. So great analogy
Maybe,
there.
maybe. But yeah, I mean, I think
Maybe.
it's exactly that. That is the question, right? Is like, when are you using a professional? And that's when it comes into, Thread and Comtec is,
Absolutely.
with everyone having access, with everyone being able to put things out there, what stands out, right?
Yeah.
What connects? And that's something that is incredibly important as we start to move through all of the exploitative out there.
Absolutely. And I think AI might feel new, but it's been evolving for a long time, and it's going to keep evolving in terms of how we use it. So yeah, really, really exciting to see how it develops further. And I think touching this brings us nicely onto our next myth, which is AI doesn't need humans in the loop. I'm happy to kick this one off again because this is quite a topic of contention, let's say, in the translation industry or debate.
Sure, absolutely.
So I've been in the industry for 13 years. I've worked with AI machine translation for at least five, quite heavily at least. And from what my professional opinion and most of what I've seen where success is needed, AI does very much need humans in the loop. Before I go on though, I think humans in the loop is a really strange thing to say, a really weird term. I know, Sarah, you've got some thoughts on this as well.
I love this. So everyone, this is a very new thing to me. James and I were talking last week, and I just heard from someone named, his name is Arl Lomel. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, but he was talking about, instead of using humans in the loop, saying humans at the core, which really gives the
Yeah.
idea of humans having control, which we should have. And I know, James, at Comtech, you'll talk about, actually should it be machine in the loop, right?
Absolutely. I think that's the way of looking at it. Like, from what I've seen, it's just AI has great benefits, but it's about the use of the AI to make sure you're getting the best outcomes. The reason why we need humans in the loop is to work with the AI and to make sure the quality is there. If you're going to use AI, if you make the decision to use AI in your content processes, it's using it in the right way to get you the best quality. So when in the translation industry, whether it's machine translation or whether it's generative AI, whenever those approaches are used within a translation workflow, it's essential to have humans at the start in the pre-translation process and afterwards in the post-translation process. And I'll give you some examples of why, really. So in terms of pre-machine translation or Gen AI translation, it's so important to make sure that the machine is working for you, not against you. And a lot of that comes down to customization of machine translation engines and fine-tuning of large language models. That includes creating glossaries of key terms to make sure that the AI, the machine, is using the right terminology for a start. It means making sure you are writing good prompts to make sure that if you're using these tools as part of your content creation workflow, you're doing it properly, and the content's going to actually be in line with your brief. There's a lot of prep that goes into this that people might not necessarily appreciate, but it's lots of kind of customization and fine tuning, and that includes rounds of validation by linguists as well. Sometimes 2 or 3 rounds to make sure that the copy is decent enough for use within machine translation workflow. So there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on before to really make the machines work for you, and that's obviously all done by humans. The other important thing is the post translation stuff. You may have heard of translation post editing or human post editing. MTP, it's commonly called as well. That's essential, working with machine translation output or LLM output, especially LLMs where there's lots of bias potentially, or facts that need checking from the copy. You also need to check the terminology is valid. So you might have programmed it with instructions. Have those been followed in the copy? Also working with the humans as well in the loop. I've just said the phrase I hate, humans at the core. It means that we can add in the nuance and focus on the right things. The machine can create some good base content maybe as a starting point, but really getting the humans to focus on the right things is why it's essential to have humans involved in the process. Sarah, your thoughts on the matter?
Well, I mean, and this thought just came up. Well, I mean, it's present all of the time, but something that for anyone in the audience, I really want to emphasize with what James is saying is that he's talking about custom AI models. There are a lot of general AI models out there, and all of that work that you just heard that James and his team is doing and that Thread and our team is doing, that's not happening with general AI. And the word that kind of keeps coming up is control. With general AI, you don't have that same control. With the custom AI, we have much more control. So I just want to just put that out there because I think there is, again, this, we're here to kind of sift through the surface of everything that's out there. And that's one of the big things is that right now AI is available everywhere and it promises so much. And so going into why it's important to have humans at the core, as we're now saying, is because of that control. And I just think that's really, important to emphasize. I mean, anyone who is on this call, I imagine, has had experience with AI and understands how kind of messy and tricky and inaccurate and hilarious at times it can be as well. I mean, I know on our side, some of the things that we really see AI neglecting is capturing nuances, right? For example, gender. Gender is a thing that it has a really difficult time with. It still very much exists in the binary. If you are a brand that is about expression and style, you definitely want to make sure you have a human that is very heavily involved in this so that you can make sure that they're not saying that men can't wear skirts or that all sleeves need to be down to your wrists or like brown goes with olive. Like it's so traditional in so many ways. And so this all ties into again, many touch points of humans being in the loop or at the core, but the big one is consumer trust. Right? Like when you are putting words out there, you are representing your brand. And so if it is not accurate, if it is just general, what are you saying about yourself? So for me, I'm like, biggest thing here, well, not the biggest, there's many big things here, but something that I really, really am going to emphasize is the consumer trust aspect of this.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. And I think that just shows why we're needed more than ever. These tools aren't going anywhere. They're here to stay. It's how we use them and work with them and make sure that, these things we've seen, because we've all seen Google Translate failed blogs online where companies have run something through Google really quickly and it's got the funny translation. And you see that, there's funny signs in the shops or see like luxury brands have completely got their branding wrong. So it's all these kind of things. It's so important to get everything checked to make it work with you, not against you, and give you the savings you need. I think that brings us nicely. We've talked a lot around the kind of customization time and prep time. The next myth we're looking at is AI is always cheaper. And I think there's a yes and a no to this. I think there's the hidden cost, but I think we've also just covered a lot of that in the previous section. AI, first of all, and if we're looking at a per word model in translation, and we compare, which is kind of one of the standard ways of pricing in the translation industry currently, at least, machine translation post editing or working with LLM content revision, it can be potentially 20 to 30% cheaper than human translation on a pure word model alone. But as I've just said, there's a lot of customization that might be needed behind the scenes. And to get these cost savings long term, investment up front is so important to make sure that your engine is trained as well as possible and it's verified by humans, multiple rounds to make sure that it's going to give you the best benefits you can get in terms of cost. Also, it's cost does vary by language. It might seem with free tools like Sarah was saying, there's like generic translation models out there that you can just put something in, it put something out. These models are trained by the developers at different levels. So languages which are more complex, Arabic is a good example, or languages which are low resource languages, which are essentially languages that have a lower presence of content on the internet out there on which these models are trained on. These are actually going to be harder to translate using machine translation than a human. And in our experience, sometimes using AI for these languages, because the edges aren't refined as some language combinations like English, French, German, Spanish, it's actually cheaper to translate it by a human and faster as well, because the technology is not there yet. It's not to say it won't be in future, but there is a huge discrepancy between languages in terms of how good they are. And that obviously has an impact on cost as well. But my advice regarding MT costs is you can achieve them. You can achieve long-term cost savings if, and the big caveat is if you spend the time investing in the customization, first of all, and putting that work in upfront to get you these savings, and also investing in regular reviews as well, and regular recustomization and retraining of engines based on feedback received. That's going to give you the best outcomes, really.
Yeah,
Thoughts,
definitely.
Sarah?
James, I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but I'm just thinking about this. It came into my mind as you're talking. And I am currently learning French, and I went into Google Translate because I was trying to communicate with my boyfriend and like be really cute about it. And I like said what I said, and he was like, "What? No, we would never say that." And so just thinking about like like SEO is cheaper. We're talking about the workups front because like you do have to train the AI to
Yeah,
understand the nuances, right? Because like it's not just what you put in is exactly what it's going to put out. On our
absolutely.
side, anyway, I just thought about that and I was like, oh, it's just a classic example. But
Really
on
is.
our side, where we really come up with difficulty in making AI cheaper, again, more so like finding cost savings, is that there is absolutely potential for cost savings in the long run. As you
Yes.
mentioned, there's investment up front, but what stands in the way of really seeing those cost savings is data. If you do
Yeah.
not have good data, and like brands out there, I'm just going to tell you most don't, so don't worry. Like we can work through that together. But data is really a big roadblock in that. If you do not have clean data, like in, as they say, then you're not going to have
Yeah.
accurate copy out. For us, where we find those cost savings is the ability to have a good, accurate foundation that we can then build off of,
Yeah.
right? And so if that information isn't there, if data is inaccurate, if it's in the wrong place, then we're probably not going to be able to, whether with AI assist or just on our own, be able to accurately capture what you want for your brand and for your product.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, I'm sure everyone here is probably like, oh yeah, like understand, we've been there. This is the frustration. We're like all, I think, aware of that. But I think when we talk about cost savings, like we are talking a lot about cost savings, like period. But I think
Yeah.
cost savings actually can expand into the thing that I'm really excited about, which is that it actually creates opportunity. It's not like
Yeah.
cost savings and you like bury that away in your pocket. Like you can actually take those savings and put them towards other things, right? Where did you not
Absolutely.
have budget for before? Where can you reallocate those funds? So I think that there's opportunity for scale, there's opportunity for expansion. I mean, you and I have talked so much
Yeah.
about like the possibilities between the flow of content starting at an original source and then growing into translations, the amount of people that you can connect to, right? The amount of consumers that you could then
Yeah.
gain because you are able to put investment. Again, that, I mean, you can see I've got the hands going everywhere. That is the thing that I am most excited about when it comes to these cost savings.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And I think looking at content and creation and translation as an investment is a really wise move because look at what you can do with this content. You can essentially make sure that you're safeguarding your brand, you're growing your brand. Again, from a translation perspective, localizing your website from one language to another. If you're seeing marketing, you're seeing traffic, you're seeing growth from your UK site or your US site, why wouldn't you translate that into French? Because you can then actually double that revenue stream potentially. So I think looking at cost savings, I think it's all about the opportunities. And I do think that in terms of AI, I am seeing people want to translate more, which is good, which is a good thing ultimately for our industry. There is more content than ever being created, which means more content than ever is being translated. It's just doing it in the right way, I think, for us, which comes back to kind of like the prep time, the quality aspect, to make sure that
Yeah.
yeah, it's not being messed up, so it's going to cause you financial impact in the long run as well. There's always the potential issues down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that like, investing now in the present, cleaning up that data, creating that solid foundation, what that is it's investing in your future, right? It is future
Absolutely.
proofing your brand.
Absolutely. I think that's so true. And I think that brings us nicely onto myth number 4, which is AI is always faster. No, I feel like we've just debunked this one already, Sarah, while we were talking. But it's a common myth that AI is always faster. And I have found working with brands who have had an interest in AI over the last few years that speed and scale seems to be much more of a driver for the use of AI than cost savings does, which is a good thing essentially. It shows people want to do more rather than do less for less, which feels like a good thing. But in terms of AIs being faster, what's your experience?
I mean, again, like you said, we kind of just went through this. We have seen with the different custom AI tools that we have built that we can work anywhere depending on the tool from 1.5 times faster to 5 times faster. However,
Yeah,
again, you lose that gain of speed if the data isn't in place and therefore you're doing
absolutely.
copy correction. So again, it really all comes back to the data. It's work and it's investment. So like again, it can absolutely help the process. It can be faster, but everything has to be really solid for that to really work. But I mean, we've seen a lot of gains definitely in the custom tools, and again, emphasizing that these are custom tools, which means that we have trained them to understand your brand, language,
Yeah,
technologies, etc. So it's creating a solid foundation for our team to then work with. So it's not like just hitting generate and go blind, like it's off to the races. Like, no, like we are still really
yeah.
working closely with it. So it's when we say AI is always faster, what we're really meaning is that it is allowing our teams to work more efficiently.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and helping your brand scale as well, not necessarily. Yeah, I think that's so true. I think the kind of the gains you said, I would say the exact same thing from a localization perspective. In terms of data, having the terminology understood, and having AI programmed and taking the time to kind of make sure the engine is refined and is going to give you the accurate output. That's enables you to get the speed savings, or people to work faster, more efficiently. Generally find that with post editing, it can be post editing of by human translators of machine translation content if it's decent and customized and it's an okay baseline to work from, and some of the issues that you might commonly find have been eradicated already. It can be 50% faster. It can be 60% faster potentially, or 70% with light touch post editing, which is looking for specific things only rather than doing a full review of the translation. So, but yeah, you don't get there unless you've got the data or you've done your free work.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Awesome. So we're now looking at our last of our 5 myths, Sarah, and I can think of no better person than you to answer this one. I'm going to give you the floor for this one because I feel like you are the specialist in this area as a content creator. So myth number 5 is AI is creative. I'm very interested to hear because I know we've spoken about this, but yeah, share with the group
Yes,
what your thoughts are here.
show the group. Oh man, this is a hot topic. I mean, really, especially at the studio, obviously, we are a copywriting studio. And so when we are working with AI, like, what does that mean to be creative? Like, is this creative enough? Is this good enough? Like, we have been working in AI for almost 5 years now. And so we have definitely seen the evolution, we have seen it
Yeah.
improve, but like, our standards are very high, y'all. So, like, again, this question, is AI creative? We've talked a lot about like how we can measure speed and we can measure cost savings, but
Yes.
how do we measure creativity? Like, does creativity equals quality, or does
Yeah.
quality mean that it's just accuracy? And this is something that I actually would love to see people in the chat responding to. Like,
Yes.
how do you define creativity, and like how do you define quality? This is something that actually James and I went on like a 30-minute long rant about this the other day. So this will
Yes.
actually be a future webinar, we realized. So please, yeah, any thoughts that you have around this, let us know, because we will be absorbing that and using them in the future. So when we talk about creativity in AI, that creativity that we're seeing is randomness, right? It is predicting. It is not intuitive. It's not emotive. It's not basing anything off of experience. That's where those writers come in. And there's this quote that I'm going to read. I've come across a lot of quotes, they're everywhere, but this is from Tucker Fort, and it's about design specifically, but I think that it applies to writing, to AI generally. And so he says, good design is often defined by what you don't say, not by what you do say. And generative AI struggles with restraint. And I think that's so true, right? Like, one of the things that when we've done comparisons, we've run tests through ChatGPT of, like, create a story in the style of so and so. And like, it's fine. Like, I can't say that it's like bad. Would I
Yeah.
want to invest my time in reading it? No, but someone might. But
Yeah.
like, the thing that we really see is like, it's very obvious. There's a lot of metaphors. There's something that's not quite connecting there,
Yeah.
right? And like I was talking about earlier, how one of the things that we've seen is that like AI is still kind of binary. Like, it's still very
Yeah.
like, girls wear dresses and boys wear basketball shorts, and like, this is how you style it. It doesn't have the ability to imagine that instinctual expression. And so I know on our side, like, we, as a writing studio, like, we are connecting with those little things that, like, again, we're still trying to figure out how do we put that exactly into words, that really
Yeah.
special magic that, our like writers can do. So is AI creative? It's random and it's interesting. And I think that it can really spark creativity,
Mm.
right? Like, I mean, I know if you have been sitting at your computer and writing and writing and writing, even the best writers, writer's block, right?
Yeah.
And so what it allows, I think, and where it's a real benefit, is that it can create that spark. It can give a foundation. It can, because of its randomness, say something in a turn of phrase or make an observation that you're kind of like, huh, no, oh, okay, like, let's follow that. But it's never the final
Yeah.
product of creativity. It's the start of creativity.
Absolutely. I think that's so true. And I think when I liken it to the translation industry, again, it's a tool in the toolkit. We have things
Hmm.
like translation memory. We have things like other tools that help us do a good job. And this is perhaps for us the new thing, not a replacement for
Yeah.
human translation, but it helps us spark ideas, do research, think of different ways of saying the same thing. The randomness is so true. You talk about you can put the same thing in and get different answers out. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's really, really, really interesting take.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I know at our studio, like, we, as I've mentioned, we build custom AI tools for our clients, not all of them, right, where it where it works. And in that, it is, as I've mentioned, that foundation, but where also our team uses it internally is for research, right?
Yeah,
Because it is that spark. And so, yeah, I think that of course, there are a lot of benefits with AI. We're definitely seeing them. However, it is with a lot of caution, right? And
yeah.
it is with a lot of intention.
Absolutely. And I think I'm looking forward, as you touched on previously, we're going to be doing another webinar following this one around what quality looks like in this kind of AI content generation world we now live in. I think that's going to be an incredibly nuanced conversation as well around our experiences. So I'm looking forward to digging
Yeah.
deep into that and kind of sharing some insight with our listeners and viewers on that. point as well.
Yeah, I'm seeing some stuff coming in around ideas of creativity. So yeah, I'm excited to dive a little bit into that. And
Absolutely.
with us, it's never a little bit, it's a lot, but you know.
It's a lot, exactly. We get excited around concepts, don't we? And creativity in our work.
Just a little bit.
Little bit. So we've got some really cool comments and questions in the chat and the Q&A. I'm going to start going through this. If anyone else would like to add a question to the Q&A or the comments, please feel free to do so. I'm going to go through and just first of all pick out some of the comments on the last piece we talked about around creativity, which I think is really good before we move on to some of the other questions. So a few comments. One from Joanna, first of all. Hello, Joanna. She's mentioned maybe to measure creativity, it'd take a human panel judging the output of AI versus human copy. I know you do a lot of testing, Sarah, on this point as well. Have you come across that before when you've kind of done human versus AI testing?
Yeah, so we have done testing looking at purely, you know, thread written copy, AI, purely AI written copy, AI copy with a human post edit. The AI copy trended downwards, I think something by 15%. Thread written copy has great returns, I will say. And with our AI generated, human post edited, it's still a little like we're figuring it out. Like
Yeah,
but sometimes it's been like, oh, maybe 2% down, maybe it's a little bit higher, 1%, like nothing. It's really towing that line. It is very clear that human written copy is, I'll say specifically thread written copy, performs better. However, again, like if you're looking to scale, as Molly's mentioned here, you know, which we'll touch on as well, like it depends on what the client needs. If the client needs copy on the page, then like, and you know,
absolutely.
AI generated, human post edited is fantastic, right? But in terms of like AI purely copy, what we have seen, and again, things are changing every day, but is that it trends downwards.
I agree. I think I make a very similar comment around the whole quality perspective, which I know Tom has also made reference to in the comments as well. I think he makes a really good point. Quality is not necessarily he's put here creativity equals originality, approach, and unique insight. Quality is actually achievement against objectives commercially, and I think that's something that's really, really important to focus on going
Mm-hmm.
forward. I think, like you've said, there's so much content out there now. We cannot translate everything and we cannot or refine everything in the best way possible. So it's really picking what are your objectives for your business? What's the content going to do for you? I think when we come to talk about quality, it'll be interesting to see how quality is defined. In translation, we've always kind of long standard it's quality is meant linguistic quality, a really, really good translation, linguistically accurate. But we're seeing now with different approaches to translation and clients wanting different things and different tools popping up. Quality does mean different things. And I think it means it
Yeah.
depends on what the brand see as quality. And is that based on the results? Are they looking for polish and perfection? We don't know. I
Yeah.
think it's a very nuanced conversation depending on the brand, the content type, the end use. Um, yeah,
Yeah, James,
interesting
I'm curious,
time.
how do you, I know we've talked about this before, but how do you approach that with a client where you are introducing to them the idea of potentially like, you know, you have three different tiers of how you want to work. And how do you like to understand quality, right? Like that's that exact question of like, you know,
Yeah,
we have our ideas of what quality is, but it really comes down to also what the client is asking for. And I think that we can always advocate for something if we think differently for that. But like,
absolutely.
how do you approach that with a client?
Yeah, it's really good. I think really good point. I think giving options. Lots of clients come to us now because they know what machine translation is. Uh, so they kind of they're interested in it. They don't necessarily know if they need it or want it or not, but they're interested in knowing about it. So I think it's being really honest and transparent, telling them this is what this is what human does, giving recommendations of use cases. There is content that you can actually use both options for depending on what it is and how it's going to be used. So one thing we like to do is give samples. We like to give, multiple options. This is your fully human approach. This is your AI with human at the core approach. This might be a transcreation approach, which is kind of creating original
Mhm.
content from scratch. And it's doing samples and giving ideas and letting the client choose for themselves. I found that really,
Yeah.
really interesting. Like I had a client recently that were really interested in AI because I'd heard about it. Then we did a sample for them and we also did a human sample for them. And actually, they wanted the human. They chose to pay more
Yeah.
because of what they wanted. Other clients have
Yeah,
the opposite
absolutely.
effect, but it was totally for what they thought was what they think. So
Yeah.
it's hard to say.
Well,
I've seen people who I would traditionally recommend, oh, I would always go the human route for this type of content, but they've been happy with the sample. Like, oh God, that's so good. We're really happy with that. And conversely, I've seen people I would say, oh, depending on budget or time, maybe try this approach, and actually they prefer human. So it's very it's a hard one to
yeah.
answer on.
Well, and I think you said something too in there that was a little hidden in all that you were saying, all the good things you were saying, is that also like when we're talking about using AI, it doesn't mean for everything. So like there are clients where we just might use AI over here. Again, we talked about kind of like how the kind of time and potential cost savings can then allocate budget elsewhere. So that means that it's also determining with the client like where is this copy or this translation
Yeah,
hitting the mark using X, Y, or Z? And then where do we really need to put a lot of intention and attention on? So I think there's that level too with when talking with clients.
absolutely. And I had the same situation a couple of months ago as well with a client. Um he wanted to do X portion of content using human for his website and X portion of content for his behind the scenes stuff using machine translation, post editing, because he knew I want the best of the best for this content. It's my
Yeah.
external content. That's going to suck up all my budget, but I know I need it because that's my investment. This content I need it doing, but it's for my team. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's
Mm-hmm.
understanding versus making money. So it was very much, yeah, just kind of helping people navigate
Yeah.
what's their budget and what they can where to make their investment, I think.
I'm gonna come in with just like a little hot take here. It's something that we've been talking a little bit about at the studio because we've been saying like human written versus AI generated, and I think that a really important distinction, just as the copies and translations we talk about in AI, is like, is it good? Is it bad? Is it good enough? Is it great? Also, like humans, there's such a full spectrum, and so we've been
Yeah.
trying to shift the way we talk about human written and saying thread written or Comtec translated because there's
Yeah.
a special skill that is brought there that's not just about being human. So I just want to throw that out there for you to think about, James.
I love that. Exactly. I think anything to avoid saying human, it just feels really weird to using
Yeah,
the human
totally,
as
totally.
the
It's like
comment.
this
So
this
yeah, I love.
comparison. Yeah. So I'm just like, no, it's very specific.
Absolutely. No, that's wicked. We've got some really other cool questions, which I really want to get your take on, Sarah. So we have a question from Stu. He says, what kinds of skills should content managers be learning in the next 5 years to stay current in AI?
I mean, the number one sort of recommendation that I would make is to play, like have playtime in these different tools. AI, know what's out there. I know that sounds very, very broad, but I think that you, as a content manager for your team, for your company, needs to really understand what AI is capable of and understand how you want to use it. This,
Yeah,
again, this conversation that we come in terms of like quality, good enough with our brands, like you need to understand that for yourself. And so like one, just literacy with AI. I think. What else would I recommend? I think understanding, I mean, again, data is going to be really big and understanding the kind of data that you need to work with just as your team, regardless of AI right now, right? Like, what do
yeah,
you need to run a successful campaign or a successful project? The same rules apply for AI. So just thinking about your own efficiencies and then the things that are required from brands or whoever you're working with. I think that is going to be like you have to have a clean foundation in order to also like implement a clean foundation on the other side.
yeah. Fantastic answer. I couldn't say it any better myself. So we've got three more questions. So they're coming in thick and fast. So next question is from Mark. He says, AI works faster, but can it do something better than a human? I find this quite hard to answer, actually.
I
Can
mean, I think
AI
if
do
we're
something
talking
better than a
about
human?
generative AI, I mean, can I do something better than a human? Like, there's a lot of things that we know that AI generally like does really well, coding, for example, and like it
Yeah.
can sift through lines and lines and lines and come up with something much faster than a human. But if we're talking about generative AI in the world of content creation, interesting. So I would say, and I'm sure you would say the same as translations, like in terms of content in terms of writing, like no. However, it's interesting because I was just listening to a podcast called "Is AI Creative?" It's on the Gray Space. I recommend it. But they were talking about how, the woman, the guest, who I cannot remember her name at the moment, she is a writer, and she was like, yeah, everything I see in terms of writing, I'm just kind of like, okay, yeah, it's good enough, I guess. And but she's like, but when I look at the art that is being generated, she's so impressed. But then when she talks to her friends that are in the world of art, they're like, no, like it's fine. So I
Yeah.
think that we're all like, there are things that we are impressed by when we don't know it ourselves, when it's not our skills. That's where it can be helpful, again, to kind of give us an intro into that world in a different way. But like in terms of, the best humans currently, again, like you can never make a promise when it comes to AI, but from my perspective, like, no, I don't think that AI in the world of generative AI can be better than our best and even great humans, good humans.
I would agree, especially with Gen AI, 100%. I think, like we said, humans are at the core. So, and yeah, the AI
Yeah,
is our little tool to help us do
yeah.
better. So,
It's our little tool. Yeah,
is our little buddy to help us.
yeah.
So that's great. Another question from Mark: how do you respond when a client checks your work against an AI copy checker and rejects work, the AI copy, even if it was written by a human? I'm happy to take this one because it's something we
Sure.
often get with machine translation. Well, with human translation. I think we have sometimes, if a client doesn't like a piece of translation, they'll say, "Oh, it reads like it's been translated by Google Translate," which is the kind of classic feedback we'd get if a client doesn't like it, kind of first off. Um, I think in terms of responding, if it's human copy, prove it's human copy. I think with translation, and I'm sure Sarah will probably agree, or that copy is very subjective. We all write differently, we all read differently, we all speak differently, we all absorb information differently, and I think part of our role in kind of creating or translating content is to kind of learn these preferences, what a client likes, what a brand likes, and incorporate them into the process. So I think when you get these questions, I think it's important to keep an open mind. I think it's important to say, thank you for your feedback. Just to confirm, it has been created by a human. Happy to kind of let you meet the translators or, put you in touch with the team. And we usually recommend a feedback call. Let's look into the feedback. What didn't you like? What did you feel? What didn't hit the mark? It's not necessarily it's wrong. It's like it's just not exactly how you want it. So it's just that kind of navigation. It's something that we do a lot, especially in the early stages of working with customers. Um, which is why it's also important to do things like sampling at the start of an or early in the working relationship and having a feedback loop to kind of get that all ironed out. But yeah, it comes up. I think it's just good to kind of say. But again, it's because people don't necessarily know what's happened behind the scenes in the minute detail, and they might think they know a product because they've heard of Google Translate, but actually they might not know a professional translation workflow, how it works behind the scenes. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, what I would add to that is, in terms of AI use, the only thing that has come back to Thread, which is not about the copy itself, which again is post edited, but it is questions around data. And so again, I'm just going to like reiterate that one more time, is that anytime that there has been like, and it's not like just feedback, like not anything bad, but it's kind of like, oh, actually, can you correct this? Oh, actually, it has X, Y, and Z. It's because the data wasn't there. And so it's coming then later on to be like, oh, we want to make sure that we see this. So that's the kind of
Yeah,
feedback that we get on our side. So yeah, get your data clean, everybody.
yeah. Constant feedback loops as well. Constant feedback loops,
Yes.
constant refining,
Yes.
data refinement. And there's definitely
Yeah.
been a common trend of this talk today, hasn't there? There's been a few things, so hopefully,
Yeah.
customization, data,
Yeah.
share with
I
you
mean,
guys.
too, I mean, they're like the two most like incredibly important parts of AI use.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that you're going to hear that and continue to hear that from us moving forward.
Absolutely. And we finally got one last question, which I think wraps up this webinar really, really nicely. So from Emma, what would your suggestions be for brands starting out with using AI for content creation, both in English and other languages? What would your top tips be? Do you want to take this one first, Sarah, or shall I?
What would I'm like, I don't have my glasses on. I'm like, what would your suggestions be for brands starting out with using AI for content creation, both in English and other languages? I mean, again, let's get your data clean. No surprise, that's my top suggestion, but that is like the foundation of what we're building.
Yeah,
James, as you've mentioned, because we all have different ideas of what quality is, what hits the mark, doing samples, doing a pilot
yeah,
project. We always do a pilot projects with our clients to make sure that what we are creating does hit the mark and we can make any tweaks as we
yeah,
need to. So clean data, pilot project, and having, I mean, again, client involvement in terms of determining like, yes, this is the right output. This is the right deliverable. We are hitting that mark. So that would be those would be my big two to start with.
yeah. I think so. I think keep an open mind around it as well.
Yeah.
That you might end up with human. You might end up with a hybrid approach. I think listening to advice as well and doing the sampling process, looking at the positives and negatives from the copy, like what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the limitations of that copy, taking the time, I think, as well to kind of investigate it before diving head first. I always say this of translation, take the time to prep before you just go in and translate. And that's across human as well as anything with machine involved. So I would say be open-minded, do all the things that Sarah said, and yeah, take your time.
Yeah, take your time. I know. Going back to like, is AI faster? It's like you want to take your time. Also, again, like this is investment,
Yeah,
and you don't want to, you don't want to do anything sloppy or messy because that means that you don't have a solid foundation in the future, and that's when things all fall apart.
excellent, absolutely. And you can get all the exciting investment in other areas all comes with doing this prep work as well. All the
Yeah,
great opportunities come from doing the prep. So yeah, it's really, really exciting.
yeah,
Um, Well, I think that brings us nicely to the end of our discussion. Thank you so much, Sarah, for your time today. Where can we find you if people want to connect with you after the webinar?
you can find me on LinkedIn, Sarah Lewis, the most general name that you can find, but I'm at Thread Creative. You can also email me at Sarah at Thread Creative. That one's much easier with an H. Yeah, I'm around. Find me.
Fantastic. We shall.
Yeah.
I'm obviously James Brown. You can find me on LinkedIn and by our website as well. So please do get in touch. And if you have any comments, we're both here for any kind of advice around AI, also to share information around content creation and translation, respectively, if you're interested. And as Sarah teased, we'll be doing another webinar early next year around what does quality look like in AI. So please stay tuned. And we look forward to speaking with you all soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, James.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a
Bye.
nice evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you may be in the world. Thank you very much.